Welcome to the Economy Magazine at I-24 News, where we provide a daily view on world markets and the global economy. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Well, today we'll delve into the hot topic of Israel's natural gas discovery. Some 30 trillion cubic feet off Israel's coast, the world's biggest find in a decade. Well, the debate stirred again on Wednesday after the government delayed taking the nat gas framework to the cabinet and Israeli parliament for the second time in a month. Well, now for a recap, our reporter Shelby Weiner filed this next report.
The discovery of Tamar and Leviathan fields has brought sweeping change to the natural gas sphere in Israel. The discovery includes over 30 trillion cubic feet, an unprecedented amount of gas for the country. It brought regulation of Israel's energy market into focus and sparked debates about overhauling the tax and royalty laws that have been in place since 1952. And beyond the realms of tax revenue, excess Israeli gas has diplomatic potential. Regional ties could be created out of energy deals. Egypt is facing severe gas shortages. Turkey is looking to diversify its supply, and Cyprus is in need of a partnership. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the small island this week to discuss just that.
We think that by cooperating with each other, we can take it out more easily. We can market it better. To the betterment of both our societies.
Despite the prospects of diplomacy in the tense Middle East and the potential for huge state benefits, discussion over Israel's gas industry is proving to be slow. Netanyahu says every option must be considered seriously.
This is something that we are discussing very intensively. There are many possibilities, and we're going to explore each one of them and make a decision, but it's based on cooperation. Energy is the first field.
But progress remains elusive. Just on Tuesday, Netanyahu and Energy Minister Yuval Steinitz canceled a planned cabinet discussion that was supposed to formalize an official Israeli natural gas roadmap. Though Steinitz promised to submit the roadmap to ministers by the end of next week, Parliament recesses for the summer on Wednesday, and it's uncertain when legislators will be able to vote on the issue. In the meantime, Israel remains without an official national export plan, and only time will tell when the bureaucratic deadlock will be resolved.
Now on set, we are joined by Ariella Berger, head of oil alternatives and energy research at the Israeli Institute for Economic Planning. She's also a fellow at Signal, the Sino-Israel network. Thank you very much for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
What is the story so far?
Well, the story itself goes back a few years since the natural gas was discovered in Israel. And when that happened, there were a number of government committees that were set up in order to decide on what to do with Israel's natural gas. Now, those committees, we're talking back 2 years ago, the Tzemach Committee in particular, was quite controversial because it seemed to want extensive export of Israel's gas, which is a highly controversial matter. Which we can talk about why it's controversial later. After there was some public protest and even an attempt at a petition at the High Court at the time of the Tzemach Committee, there was a general understanding as to the Tamar gas field, which is already producing gas, would be for the domestic market. And things went ahead. Not everything went ahead. Big industry got hold of the gas. Small industry still isn't getting the gas in Israel. And then something came up at the end of last year. It was the same time that the price of oil was going downwards, and which is not good for the gas companies. And the antitrust commissioner, the former antitrust commissioner, David Gilo, declared that Delek and Noble Energy, being major shareholders in both the Tamar gas field and Leviathan, are a monopoly. And not only that it was a monopoly, that there would have to be some kind of restriction around it because it couldn't continue. The reason being that it would harm the consumer. Now, what then happened has been actually very dramatic. It's been a little bit, it kind of exploded in the last month or so. Normally, when the antitrust commissioner says something like this, whether it's a Cellcom, telecommunications company, something like that, the companies who are told that they're a monopoly either protest it in the High Court, or they acquiesce and the monopoly is broken up. In this case, something unusual happened. The gas companies, together with other government ministries, used a clause in the antitrust law to say that if there are reasons for foreign relations or for security of the state which are valid, then it's possible to effectively bypass the antitrust commissioner. Now, this is highly unusual. This has not happened before in Israel's history. And so in the last 6 months, the government offices and the gas companies have worked out what's being talked about today, which is a framework which is supposedly and it's controversial, the solution to the problem of the monopoly in Israel. So as you can imagine, when this came out a month ago, and I can explain to you more what happened there was quite a lot of protests that came up.
Well, the idea here is that if they don't side with the companies, Noble Energy and Delek, that this will deter other foreign companies from doing business in Israel, right?
Right. Well, that is definitely an opinion that's heard in the media, but not everybody agrees with it. It's a fact that other companies have already been interested in Israel as a gas market. They're not the only companies, but I think it's important to understand where the controversy is coming from. First of all, not everybody is of that opinion. In fact, that opinion serves the gas companies. The protest is about the monopoly in the gas system in Israel. The gas is a fantastic resource for Israel. Where it can replace oil, for example, it can halve energy bills, which is critical for industry, which isn't getting the gas at the moment. And the question is there a monopoly in the garden of the economy of Israel? If you see a weed, you should take out the weed. And this framework lets the monopoly continue for another 6 years before it's broken up. So there's a question there whether what happened in the framework is correct. Because you see, when there's a monopoly, there can be overcharging on the commodity. And there's an awful lot of money at stake. I can give you an overview of the numbers that we're talking about. So that's just one facet of it. Another facet of it is actually to do with energy security and about the infrastructure between the gas fields and Israel and the implications of that from this framework. It's quite a complex topic.
Well, these are actually really fascinating points, and they really wrap up and tie in well with this interview that we did with John Hofmeister, the former president of Shell Oil, and he offered a surprising view on the government's steps surrounding its dealings with the nat gas conglomerates. We are joined on the phone by John Hofmeister, the former president of Shell Oil. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, do you think the Israeli government is acting appropriately now in forcing gas companies to sell shares in the Leviathan and Tamar gas reservoirs?
Well, my impression of what's happening in Israel right now is a movement forward, but without a plan. In other words, I'm not sure that the entire process of thinking through how natural gas can and should be developed, how natural gas should and can be marketed, how the development of the economy overall, the commercial sector, the power sector, the military sector, all the different sectors of the economy, I'm not sure there's a plan for the development of this potentially huge natural gas resource off the coast of Israel. And most countries and most companies operate according to a plan, and the fact that this is going back and forth and there's such urgency, it all reeks to me of not having a planful way forward.
Certainly, this is a hotly contested debate here. The government, though, has insisted that it favor the conglomerates over the public to avoid deterring other international firms from operating in Israel. Do you think that that stance has weight?
No, I don't. I think that, A, Israel has a potentially huge natural resource. B, international companies are very experienced at working to their greatest advantage with governments that are inexperienced and are not fully geared up, so to speak, to tackle the magnitude of the situation. And if there is a sense of rush or a sense of panic, then that's clear indication of unreadiness to proceed. Because international companies are very good at this. They work all over the world with governments. A government that is doing this for the first time should not be rushed into potentially making mistakes that they might regret over the longer term.
Well, how do you explain this rush, this sense of panic here by the government? What's the motivation?
It could be to monetize the gas. In other words, when you have a natural resource, the urgency to monetize it in the interests of the state means getting money for the gas. So there could be a rush to monetize it, which is in the taxpayer's best interest in the short term, but doesn't necessarily benefit the country overall in the medium to longer term. This rush to monetization is what I see happening. And there's probably a desire on the part of the companies that are going to produce this gas to monetize it as well, because they're exposed to their investors for the money that they've spent. And so the push from a company is normal and natural to try to make money because that's how they pay their bills. But if there isn't a plan behind it all, it could be a rush for nothing, or a rush that suboptimizes the ultimate potential of the gas resource.
Do you sense that this rush is actually perhaps in favor of some leaders within the government that might actually benefit from this sort of deal?
I don't know and don't have sources that could inform me on that, but it's happened in other countries where people have, a desire to make a decision, get it implemented, put a feather in their cap, or whatever it may be that is motivating them to make the decisions and make it happen sooner rather than later.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your perspective, John Hofmeister, former president of Shell Oil.
Thank you.
Back on set, we have Ariella Berger. Thank you again for being with us. So what is your reaction?
Well, I think just listening to what John Hofmeister said, and he's the former president of Shell, so this is a man with a lot of experience. I think he actually, in that short interview, covered a lot of very profound points. I'll give you my reaction to some of them. One of them, I think there's a basic, at the end of the day, there's a basic conflict of interest between government as the guardian of the public interest with a long-term outlook, and companies who must be loyal to their shareholders. In other words, if you, for example, buy a share in an oil or gas company, you'd like the stock to go up as soon as possible. So that means that the gas companies are naturally have a willingness to monetize as soon as possible. And I think a lot of the protest has been whether the government, whilst it needs tax revenues, if it had a longer-term perspective, if it should have planned or acted in another way. And already, we're 3 years into the gas, and a lack of planning is showing up in some areas, such as small industry. Now, this isn't directly related to the gas exports, but it's related to the importance of integrating gas into the Israeli system. There are about 500 factories, there are 2,000 factories in Israel. And most of them need gas on a low-pressure network, and most of them aren't getting gas. Out of 2,000 factories, 10 of them, actually, at the moment.
10 out of 2,000.
10 out of 2,000. We're talking about the factories that need low-pressure gas are getting the gas from the network. And the reason seems to be insufficient planning or inefficient planning or all kinds of problems. And these are the issues which really affects the economy in the long term, and employment, and all of those.
Was this really
all of
an
those
efficiency
things.
or something else that you're perhaps alluding to here?
No, I think in the case of factories, it is a kind of inefficiency which is coming, but there's also a question as to whether the planning was put in place to get over the problems which occurred. In some of the cases, it's problems of putting down the networks of the gas, and that there really is a question here. The reason I'm raising this is that it's representative of what is the wider public interest for the gas, because when you have a commodity which, when it's available to all citizens in every area now, transport, industry, and so on, then you have a fantastic way to improve the competitiveness of the Israeli economy. And whilst the gas is unavailable to Israel, it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then you see the gas companies would like to export as much as they can, as soon as they can. Well, I think there is merit in exporting a quantity of gas. for foreign relations. But one also has to be circumspect, because there's a history of other cases in other countries, and I think John Hofmeister touched on this, where there were high hopes for exporting large quantities of gas in order to cement foreign relations, and it doesn't always necessarily work out like that. So I'm not saying there's no merit in exporting, but extensive merit and of great quantities of gas when we don't know how much gas we have in place, it really is an issue. And I think that's why the public is aware. But the public is mostly, there's a lot of discomfort. Just to bring to your attention, discomfort, the price of the gas.
Right. Well, thank you very much for coming on the program. It was lovely to have you here. That concludes the show today. Do stay tuned every day, live from the Jaffa Port in Tel Aviv. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Thank you.